you shouldn't necessarily be trying to think of every minute is high art. Get the words down, finish the story, and then go back. Treat this as additive sculpture. The first draft is there, and you're gathering all the material. You're building the rough shape out of the clay of words, and then you go through and you fine tune it and make it into your finished piece. You're not working out of marble here. You can add and subtract all you want.
This is the Crit RPG Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything Lit RPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Crit RPG Podcast, the only podcast that invites people with beautiful names. With me today is Eric Ugland. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty well, thank you. I mean, it's not like we haven't been talking for about like an hour already.
If you were Patreon subscribers, you would know all the secrets we've spilled.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Now I don't have to say that. People can find us on Patreon.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Let's get to the main podcast, I guess. So, without further ado, sell me on your current series, The Good and the Bad.
Sell you on it. I think it's a fun, big, long series with interesting characters and a fun world, and there's some good humor in there. I don't know. I'm terrible at the selling of things. That's why I hire other people to do it for me.
Yeah.
Read my books. They're pretty good, and I got a lot of reviews that say they're okay.
You have literally like spent like 20 minutes like weaving tales. I'm like, oh my God, this is like such a good premise. This is amazing. So let me do this for you here real quick, even though you're not paying me for it. So
yet,
I started the Good Guys and I really like it. It's like the isekai premise is really cool. I mean, it is not a VR MMORPG story, not in the like traditional sense, but basically, Guy does something that he really shouldn't have, is probably bleeding out at the moment, and one of his friends calls him just as like the van with like the killer guys are showing up, and says like, hey, you should really like click this email. And main guy does, and then stabs someone with a fork, and there's a grenade and guns, and you should read the rest.
Yeah, and I had a lot of fun writing it, and I'm still writing it. I'm on book 16. Were I not recording this amazing podcast right now, I would be actively writing book 16.
I'm gonna get death threats. Like, you have stopped Eric from writing.
I'll be back at it as soon as we're done recording. Sheesh.
About like
I have a lot of fun with it, and I think people enjoy it. And it is a very strong individual who is a hammer in what he believes is a world of nails.
Yeah, it's a pretty fucking good premise. I like it.
Thank you.
Tell me about the bad guys.
So the bad guys is it started to be, my initial goal was to write it as kind of like a Robin Hood-esque character. So technically bad, but not actually bad. And it is about a thief mage in the capital city of an empire who gets pulled into more of the politics than he wants, kind of accidentally. And just someone who is trying to do his best to live by his own code in a place that seems destined to force him to be more than he wants to. Which I think, it seems to be something I think a lot of lit RPG deals with, people who are forced into doing and being more than they thought they could be or wanted to be.
Which is like a very powerful fantasy. It's, you might also say a lot of these stories are about, the old Nietzsche quote. You know which one I mean?
There's so many.
The one where about like, he who fights with monsters must take care lest he become a monster himself.
Yes, he who fights with monsters must take care, or he will write about fighting monsters forever in an Australian accent. Yeah. There's that one. And I think like that is kind of what I meant, but it's also like the the ordinary person in extraordinary situations.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is kind of also like a power fantasy, right? Because we all would love to be there. We all would love to like have these extraordinary adventures. And we would all like to know kind of that, like, just with grit and determination, we will like make it through.
Right.
Whenever I do like a writing class, like I did in the past, people are always like, hey, why do the main characters in these stories always have like such like amazing luck? And then my answer to that is because the stories of people who don't have luck end very abruptly.
Yeah. Right. It's like the person who doesn't magically survive the fall.
Yeah.
Is short.
Yeah. People who don't get isekai don't get isekai.
Yeah. Or the people get isekai into a dragon's lair.
They get
and wind up getting chomped unless they run away appropriately.
They get isekai.
Yes, man.
Yeah, that's
a
good.
Great title for a book.
Actually, so I have this idea about like a kind of like James Bond kind of like isekai, and I think I just found a title for it.
Especially if you have like James Bond and the henchmen like battling over the gun, and they fall into the portal, and they wake and they're get isekai'd into a dragon's lair, and James Bond is like stands up and does his James Bond thing and gets chopped promptly in half, and then you have this really the henchman just like runs, and then you follow him as this guy who has like no skills, who like was hired because he's slightly menacing looking and couldn't get a job anywhere else on this strange volcanic island.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, the other working title is The Force of 1,000 Suns.
Good.
Yeah.
Bit
Don't
long.
Google that. Don't Google that.
You can't say that. I'm going to do it right now.
Yeah. I think like the time of that meme are like way past, but it's a clear reference to that meme. I was originally going to call it The Force of 1,000 Suns, but that was way longer. No, actually, no. I came with
really amazing reverse harem and call it The Fort of 1,000 Suns. SONS.
Oh, and then like lots of like people with like very sweaty abs on the cover.
I mean, one like queen sitting like.
I love that idea because it will continue the trend of me not selling my books.
Hey, man,
we're talking about
sells.
Like craft versus like art.
Right. If you go back and were a Patreon member, you would get what we were talking about, and there would be lots of fantastic writing advice in there for you.
Oh, yeah, there was. But there's going to be more here because my next question is, what's the best advice you've ever gotten as a writer?
The best advice I've ever gotten as a writer? Oh, I mean, the silly answer would be something like, invest in your 401k promptly from the beginning.
That's good.
But probably, so here's the problem, because it would probably be something along the lines of what we talked about in the Patreon portion, where it's finished stories. But not to double down on that, the idea that to look at writing as a craft, and I love and I don't love that concept of the craft person version of writing, because there's something that's very popular amongst some of the like really high word output people, where they talk about a carpenter never has like carpenter block. They go in and they do their work every day. A plumber doesn't have plumber block. And I think that's something disingenuous, just because what we do as authors is not necessarily along the same lines, right? Because those individuals who are going in every day are going from other people's plans, and they're working from plans that have been set up, and they're working to put something together based on those plans. If you were going in every day having to design a brand new set of cabinets for a place that's never been seen before and needed to be original enough to be purchased and recognizable enough to be desired. Like, I'm sure there are times when cabinet makers are like, good God, how do I design cabinets for this space? That, I think there is the idea that you need to recognize it's a craft, and you need to be working on like the muscle of writing. Mm-hmm. And I think looking at it from that context, this is not, you shouldn't necessarily be trying to think of every minute is high art. Mm-hmm. Get the words down, finish the story, and then go back. Treat this as what's it? As additive sculpture. Mm-hmm. The first draft is there, and you're gathering all the material. You're building the rough shape out of the clay of words, and then you go through and you fine tune it and make it into your finished piece. So don't go through thinking you need. This is not like you're not working out of marble here. You can add and subtract all you want.
It's like, so finishing stories is the most important skill ever. And also you touched on many different topics that are very important to me. For example, the whole idea of finishing the story and then going back and editing. Mm-hmm. You took the word out of my mouth earlier when you said something along the lines of plotting is basically just pantsing, but in shorter. I would say plotting is pantsing, but without wasting time on the prose. Right. So when I plot, I have a very, very rough plot, like very roughly, and then I literally plot out every single paragraph. But I literally just write like very short sentences, like I go down the stairs and think about life. I take my gun and I shoot evil guys, like that sort of stuff. Right. Because it helps me stay focused. Because otherwise, I'm going to end up in fucking Narnia again.
We like Narnia.
250,000 words of the tutorial. I did that once. I will never do it again. It is bad. Don't do that.
Hey, and there is a lot to be said for writing bad books.
Oh yeah,
right. It is a phenomenal way of learning both what to do and what not to do.
Yeah,
and
totally.
There are multiple novels of mine in digital drawers that will never see the light of day because they're bad, and that's okay.
And like the idea of going back and editing is so frowned upon in the RPG space. It's like almost like an anathema, and I'm like, why? Why is it bad to have like this writing style of writing stuff down and then actually caring about it and making it better? Like, no one says it like that, of course. No one means it like that. But it is not the way of writing web serials.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that just because I've never written a web serial. I am tempted to. I've got an idea for something. Ooh. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything here because then,
it's a whole thing.
Somebody will expect me to actually write it then. Whereas now I can just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this game because it's research for this web serial I might or might not be writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't necessarily speak to that. But we are in a business that is much like the pulp writers from the early 20th century. And it's a game of numbers, right? Like, and it can simply be that people, it's not necessarily that people don't care. It could more be that there just isn't the bandwidth to do that. You need to produce X amount of material by Y time. And editing is not the same skill as writing. And a lot of people don't have the time to build both skills, and they don't have the resources to find somebody who can and do the other thing for them. I am incredibly blessed that I married an editor, and so she's my editor, and she also runs the business. So she does like 85% of our work is done by her, and I basically just write the books at this point,
which is very good.
And yeah, it's the way to do it if you can. And so for me, it's very easy. Like I write a draft and I pass it to the editor, my wife, and then I go back to work and I'm working on the next story, and she sends me back the edits and I fix things. and make changes and then send it back to her. And then, that's the process. And so it's difficult for me to like, I believe in editing, but I'm also in a very unique position.
Okay. So yes, you are, but also not, because so many people on this podcast are like, yeah, my wife is my editor or my husband. Like, Shami and John Stovall, for example, they both said like, yeah, like we edit each other's stuff, and it's
well, but she's also she's like a trained professional editor. Like that's what she was doing before.
She's a lawyer.
No, she's an editor.
Your wife.
My wife, yeah.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
I think that's
sorry, yeah.
I think that's like one of the big differences. Like she was an editor when I was.
Nice.
Yeah,
that does make it more unique than before. Yeah.
So she's.
Did you meet over books?
She's the real deal. No, I wasn't even writing novels when I met her.
Oh, interesting.
I started as a writing. I started writing screenplays and stage plays, and I wanted to be. In my youth, I wanted to be an actor or a filmmaker, and I did make movies for a while, and they were terrible, but I loved doing it. And it just got to the point where, one, I realized kind of how expensive it was and how impossible it kind of was, because I had no connections in the industry, and I had I didn't live in LA, and I, despite being able to talk to people online, I do have a lot of sort of social anxiety. So I don't like going out and meeting people.
That's okay.
So I gave up on that, and I was focusing more on theater. And I wrote tons of stage plays, and I went and got an MFA in theater, and was like, I had a lot of close success. So a lot of my plays were being requested by theaters, and I was finishing like, second or third or, finalist in prizes, but I was never winning the prizes. And I started to realize, like there's the pragmatist side of me is like, Tony Kushner is a very, very, very famous playwright in the United States. And he still has to take other jobs. He can't just be a playwright.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and there's also a lot of straight white dudes who have told their stories. And maybe I don't need to spend all this effort to tell another straight white dude story here, because there are people who are doing it better than I am. And I got tired of trying to organize things. And I was a playwright. You have to have a stage. You have to have people who perform the play. I was like, well, what can I do that doesn't have any of this other crap? Oh, I'll write books. Right? Like I love telling stories. I don't have to worry about budgets. I don't have to try to convince somebody to produce the thing. I can just do whatever I want. So then I started focusing on writing novels at that point. And I had written 2 books at that point when I was like, okay, I've done this. I'm not going to be able to sell a TV show or sell a movie or anything like that. So I'm going to take, and Roseland was originally, a friend of mine was working very closely with, I can't remember. He was working at Dark Horse Comics at the time, and he had some connections to a studio down in LA, and they were looking for things. And I was like, well, let me write something set in Portland, Oregon, which is where Dark Horse Comics is located. And so I wrote this TV show based on a private detective who was an escort. And then I was like, that's never going to get made. And then I wrote a book out of it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I forgot what the original question is that got us to this point, but
that is not a problem.
All that to say, advice, writing, just write the damn book. Oh yeah. So I was working as a production assistant, a production manager. Wow. When I met my wife. So I was working as a office type person in a nonprofit theater in New York City. And she was working as an editor for a magazine there.
Interesting.
Big magazine. And then she started working with the Food Network as a digital editor for them. And then, that was awesome. Got lots of good food.
Yeah. Yeah, I should get myself one of those wives. I
You know,
hear they're very useful.
You know, I'm not exactly sure exactly your age, but I would point out that the male-female ratio for people over 30 in New York is strongly in the male favor. There
I
are
didn't
a
know that.
lot of single women in New York.
In Berlin, it's ghosts. Lots of
Well, I
ghosting.
mean,
Yeah. But yeah.
maybe that's
I
your
don't know.
thing.
I am pale. This is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
You're
Nah, it's
looking for
like
someone who's like you and can float through walls.
absolutely white as a sheet. Or
Mhm.
I don't discriminate in that case. But like yeah, like without going too much into the topic, it's like I don't think that I should be wasting time on dating right now. I have too much shit to do.
Wow.
I have too much shit to do. Nah, it's like this is
We're gonna
like
switch into the relationship part of the
life
podcast
advice.
now.
Yeah. No, it's like I have spent all my 20s like running around and like chasing tail.
Mhm.
And I think I first need to get done with myself before I go out and do it again. Does that make sense? So I'm doing that.
I understand that concept. I don't necessarily know that I agree with it, but you know, that's I am me and you
Yeah.
are you, and do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's like I think there's some like if you constantly attract people who are in the end not very good for you, still love them to pieces. They're great. But then you should look at yourself and not other people, in my
I
experience.
mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I'm trying to do my own thing. I've been like doing my own thing for like 3 years now. And I'm slowly going back into like who I really want to be and stuff. It's good. It's fun.
Got it.
Can a team of has-been teen idols save the world? Find out in the new series Boy Bands and Dragons. When Neverboyland is sucked into a magical world, their reunion takes a back seat to staying alive. But if they can get over the past drama that drove them apart, they may find that even pop stars can be heroes. Come and discover your new favorite read, Our Comeback Tour is Slaying Monsters, the first in the Boy Bands and Dragons series by Kim Smuga Otto, dropping on Kindle Unlimited, October 25th.
Is there one thing that you would go back to and change if you could like rewrite your books? Or is there something that you've learned that you're going to be doing differently in future books?
Oh, tons of stuff. I don't know if you've gotten to the sword yet, but there's an infamous sword in the beginning of One More Last Time.
No, I haven't.
And while I stand by the decision to do it, what happens in there? Just by the sheer volume of emails and comments and criticisms, I probably wouldn't have done that. But see, here's the problem. Like, if you haven't gotten to it, I don't want to spoil it.
Don't. It's fine. It's also for listeners of the podcast, but give me something
listeners
else.
of the podcast will know exactly what I mean, because it is a running joke to the point where like I don't even have to make the jokes about it on my Discord anymore. Other people do. So I probably
you got that sorted out.
No, I mean, I didn't see it as a problem. I saw it as a very as an example of the realism. Like, so going into like, I try to make the world that I write as real as possible based on the rules established by the world. And so, oh man, I can't say anything else without spoiling it.
Find a different one. Like, give me a different one, different thing that you would change.
A different thing I would change.
Like,
I mean, there's a lot of little things I would change, but then, you know, who knows what that would have done to the book as a whole.
I mean, in general, like, and writing style, like, or
I think I probably, well, I mean, if I could change anything, I probably would have started writing novels when I noticed how well people were doing on Kindle back when Kindle came out, right? Like in those gold rush days, people were so desperate for content that you could put up almost anything and people would read it. And there is just enormous power in that. And I was so focused on being a theater kid at that point still that I didn't, I was like, oh, this is cool. Anyways, off to rehearsal. I think I wish that I had developed more discipline as a writer. So, looking not necessarily in changing any element of the story, but just I just don't have discipline in terms of like sitting down and getting the work done. And I wish that I had had found a way to build that, because I'm definitely, suffering for that now.
Okay. Like how?
Well, I mean, I don't know. How do people do it? How do people sit and write every day?
Okay.
Like I sit
routine.
down here and I like fart around, and some days I get 10,000 or 12,000 words, and then some days I get like 200.
Oh,
but like,
okay.
It's like being able to like come down and like actually get the work done. And part of that is like I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and like, it's like, oh yeah, it does make sense why I've had to have that like horrible deadline pressure to keep me working.
Yeah, because
But like
dopamine.
Yeah, deadlines are, I had a pre-order running from November of 2018 until July of last year. Just
Okay, that's pre-orders in, guys.
Well, I mean, it wasn't one pre-order. It was every single book I had a pre-order set. So I was never in a position where I could be like, oh, hey, this book needs more time to work. And I think it was great to have that pressure to make sure that I was writing and getting the work done. But also I think that some of the stories suffered because I just ran out of time.
Okay.
And so I wish that I could have been able to either take more time or find that discipline to where I wasn't like, coming off of writing a book. Oh my God, this next book is due. Like, why not just be able to be like here in the middle all the time,
Yeah, if your ADHD diagnosis is relatively recent, it's normal to have these thoughts, but you got to remember there are just certain things that you can't do. And ironically, the more you get chill about it, the easier it gets, right? Because like beating yourself up about like not hitting your goals is very counterproductive. Because in the end, like it only stresses you out more, and then like that depletes your adrenaline levels and dopamine levels, and like you get even more like sloshy. So one thing, there's a couple of things that work for different people. And to be honest, I think like having ADHD is almost like a prerequisite to writing at this point.
Seems like it is. It certainly is a part of it these days.
Yeah, common thing, but. One thing that works for Neil Gaiman, for example, he says, okay, I'm going to go down to my little gazebo. He has like a little writing gazebo, and he sits down in front of his like typewriter, no electronics, and says, I can do nothing or write. Yeah.
He uses fountain pens.
He does that too. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
He has 2 fountain pens that he keeps inked in different colors. And he writes with one color each day so he can see how many pages he's written.
Ooh, smart. I outline by hand.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. I have notebooks on notebooks. These are, by the way, the best notebooks. I don't know how easy they are to get anymore. They're called The Seven Seas Writer by Nanami Paper. Phenomenal Tomoe River paper. It's like 400 plus pages in this thing. They're great. Love them to death.
I can recommend the Leuchtturm 1917.
Leuchtturm or what he said are also phenomenal. I love that. I am actually currently, as we devolve into a pen podcast here, using a Moleskine, which I thought I would never use again. But these ones, and it's like only these ones, they are the 2024 Moleskine Daily Diaries. are strangely super fountain pen friendly. Let's see if I can find a good. Oh, so here's a drawing I did of a map. You can see like this is all fountain pen, and there's no feathering. There's no like bleed through to the other side. Like the only bleed through on the other side is like the marker that I was using to denote the water.
But yeah, that's like really good penmanship too.
Oh, thank you. And $5.
Ooh.
Because they're 2024 daily journals, so they're not no longer useful. And before anybody is too excited, this is a map of the United States. In the olden days, way old. And this is the inner sea, and this is where like California is, and this is the Appalachian Mountains.
Interesting.
There was just a really huge shallow sea in between the two areas, and then just vastly different. It's almost like vastly different worlds on either side of that ocean. It's like one side you had like small mountains and dark forests and swamps, and the other side you had huge mountains and high deserts and redwood trees and stuff. And that one side is where like all the T-Rexes were, and the other side is a whole set of different dinosaurs.
Huh. Like you mentioned this very, very offhandedly, but I do love like prehistoric, like kind of like.
I love dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, for me, not so much. I've never been a big dinosaur person. Always loved robots. But, not true. I did. My favorite plushie was a dinosaur.
It helps. Like my son is, he's just turned 8, and he has been a dinosaur kid for years. That's his main. Nice. That's still his main jam.
Yeah.
So, years of learning about dinosaurs so that I could talk to him about dinosaurs has kind of infused me with that passion. But I also like, I love, I mean, man, we're going deep into the nerd zone here, but like, I love geography and like world building based upon weather patterns and you know, what does a rain shadow do to the other side? You know, how does that formulate what you're going to find in terms of land? And then what is that land then allow for, in terms of culture, like if, you know, and like, that's kind of how I will do world building.
For John Bierce, he always asks, like the first question he asks, like, what about the sewer systems? Yeah. Right. I can't say I'm like into world building as much as like any other, like most other authors I've met, but I do like it, but it's mostly because I pants my worlds. Like I add stuff to the world as I need it, and then I see what that does with the world, and that's how I slowly like condense stuff.
Well, I think I think that's in essence what I do.
Oh, cool.
I only build as much of the world as I need. Now I will sometimes build stuff with the idea that I'm going to use it, and then find out I'm not going to. Yeah. Right. Like I'm going to write this thing here, and so I'm going to build all this stuff. Oh, I don't actually need all that. Like, I don't know, trying to look at what papers I have around me. I have like a notebook that I just use for maps. And I have like tons of maps for like places that people have never been because like I didn't need it. You know, there was no need for me to actually have developed that city and that culture and that, you know, that continent that I wound up just having my people sail by.
And so, okay, so I mentioned that like people are very happy with my current little like arc, right? And I've sped up a lot. We were also talking about time dilation and like takes 5 days and Brian Norton and like cognac and caramel. But
so for the people who weren't in the Patreon, which you should be really, what are you doing with yourselves? We were talking about the manner in which Brian, his Quest Academy series is very long, but covering a short amount of time. And before anybody thinks that's a negative, the way that he does it is phenomenal. Like I've never found someone who is able to cover so little time with so many words that are so compelling and enjoyable. Right. Yeah, so this is not a negative that we're saying here. He is a master of that sort of examining the minutia.
If you want to be a negative, you can look at the first version of Torchbearer. Lots of words. Like it's still up there. You can still read it. Lots of words. basically, I think it was like 150,000 words describing one day.
Whoa.
Now it's 250,000 describing one day. But yeah,
But
like a lot of shit can happen. Yeah, I can cut about 30%. Let's be real. But that being said, the current arc that I'm doing is doing way better than that because I've been like immersing myself into Cradle by Will White, and that guy has
Great
like
book.
breakneck pacing, amazing book and breakneck pacing. And it's also one thing that I've noticed is that like for me, when it seems like this is going too fast, people like it, right? But I am slowly getting.
I think they're very different stories, right?
Oh yeah,
and yeah, pacing is very genre and story dependent. And
like,
Seth Ring, good friend of mine,
Yeah.
love the man dearly. He and I have very different concepts on chapter length.
Yeah.
Seth is a firm believer, and chapter length should be relatively constant. And I am a firm believer in fuck your chapter length.
Yeah.
Do what
a chapter is a train of thought. Period.
Kind of, yeah. And from the writer's perspective, it's a tool you have to control the pace of your reader. Longer chapters means your reader's going to be reading more slowly. Yeah. If you have short chapters, your reader's going to be pulled ahead faster. And I guarantee you, the first time you do a one-word chapter, the world opens up for you. It's the best.
Looking forward to reading that.
I think I've only done it twice, 3 times maybe.
Yeah.
Oh man, I haven't even done that one.
You should.
Tempted.
Let's do it. I've been thinking about like this kind of stuff for so long now, and like this entire pacing thing and pacing structure. And yeah, the books are getting shorter, and I always feel as though like I'm not explaining things enough. But I think that's like early trauma I got from the first book that I wrote, because people were like, "Hey, what's going on?" And so I recently started reading Gideon the Ninth by Moore, and she just like doesn't explain anything.
Nothing. Read some of the hard-boiled detective novels by Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. They are incredibly Spartan with their words, and the pacing just rockets along, and you just have to accept that some of the stuff you're not going to know. And you start to realize like what's important. Like it doesn't matter what the carpet looks like. You know, you don't need to know the shoes on every person. Like you just give the write it almost like a police report. Like just the salient details, you know.
Have you read Gideon the Ninth? The prose is extraordinary. And while what you're saying is absolutely true and I subscribe to it 100%, Gideon and like Tamsin Moore writes. It reads like a fucking fever dream, right? You read it and the characters speak about things that you have no way of knowing with absolute 100% confidence, and they explain nothing. I have no idea how she does it. Like, to be honest, like this is beyond me. Like I'm good. I'm a good writer. I'm a good like prose writer. But the way she does it is completely beyond me. I've never seen anything like it. She kind of works with repetition a little bit, so that like you keep stumbling over this concept, and then you want to understand what's behind it, and that pulls you forward in the story, to the point where when the character starts speaking like clear, like, oh, we need to do this, by the way, you're almost disappointed, because it feels like so out of place. Like it starts with like Gideon woke up and touched the sword that hated her, or something like that. Like it was
beautiful.
It's insane, yeah. And then she describes the hatred of the sword for like 3 paragraphs.
So I oddly enough, I actually yesterday I wrote down to read the Locked Tomb trilogy.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Please do tell me what you think about it, because I have no idea what I'm thinking about it. Like, I will be quite honest, but like the density of the prose, I might not even get through Gideon. I really want to, but there's many foreign words in there, most of them bone related. Like, I don't know how I can use the like adjective osseous in a sentence, but Tamsin does it.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, I'll certainly give a read.
If you're surprised at the ending of the first book and feel as though you shouldn't be reading more, remember that it is a story about necromancers doing necromancy.
Got it. Will do.
Okay. Yeah, like, this actually brings me to my next question. What's one book that you love and why is it awesome?
A great book that I learned a lot from is one called The Red Knight by Miles Cameron. It's book 1 of the Trader Sun cycle. And Miles Cameron actually also writes under the name Christian Cameron. And his stuff is some of the best knight-based combat and life that I've read. And I think just reading all of that and trying, like, beginning to understand what that type of combat was. And because, like, that's such a part and parcel of sort of like the swords and sorcery fantasy that I write and that I love, like, the fact that I didn't know as much about it before, I guess I would chalk that into the things I wish I had changed, is just having a greater knowledge of Western European, what would it be, low Renaissance knightly combat. You know, like what it meant to wear plate. Like what, what are the horses? Like how many people did a knight require in order to be in combat? What did all those pieces of armor do? Like what was the actual, like, why did you have a sword? Why did you have a war pick? Where did you, what did you do? Like, these guys would travel with multiple horses and multiple men, and just like the sort of minutia that added to the life of that is just eye-opening or at least it was for me. I thoroughly enjoyed that series, and then he's got a series that is following a knight, an English knight in the 100 Years' War. So it's all, no fantasy, historical fiction. And again, like fantastic, just sort of like what the day-to-day life would be like, what the, preparing for battles, the little sort of like fights you would face when meeting another group of knights in the field. And just like all of that sort of stuff is phenomenal. And I loved it. And I also recently read the Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman, and the world building there is just chef's kiss. Like everything just makes sense. And like, is reading it and just being frustrated by how good, and like the facileness of the world building, where it just feels like, oh yeah, he didn't even, like, he just like opened his window and looked out at this world and pulled all of this in, like the history and like all of like the cultural things, like everything just makes sense. And it's just like frustrating to try to replicate that in my own work.
It's sometimes like, one thing I've realized is that you got to pick your poison. Like I can't write like diction and prose as well as Tamsin Moore, and also at the same time have like a certain like progression fantasy plot that like goes up and numbers go up. Like it is too much. It is too hard to like balance those things. All these things
might also be. I mean, not necessarily incompatible, but there could be a measure of incompatibility there, right?
I mean,
there's a certain complexity that happens when you have progression in lit RPG, where you are requiring the reader to pay attention to the system that exists as well. And so you could just be trying to lay too much onto the reader to then like put really dense prose and sort of shrouded world building on top of that. not to say that someone can't do it, just saying that, that is a lot of sort of creative work to try to layer on top of each other.
I'm going to try at some point, because
I firmly believe you should.
Yeah. It's like the first book of Torchbearer, I have made the mistake of like incorporating too much reader feedback without actually understanding it. Like people were like, hey, I don't know what's going on. And instead of like going like, yeah, you're not supposed to, I was like, oh, I'll explain it more. And suddenly 250,000 words, and people are going like, hey, I don't really care about the shit. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, I think that's one of the dangers of writing where you can have such immediate feedback, especially if you don't have a lot of experience writing and having the sort of confidence in what you're trying to do, to just be able to say to people, hey, trust me.
Yeah.
Right. I know you might be feeling this now, but just trust me.
Yeah, exactly. And like there was also other stuff like, characterization. I've recently been playing Chained Echoes, which is like a kickback RPG that like really celebrates 16-bit RPGs and like SNES stuff like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger. Really fun game.
Cool.
Like somewhere around like the halfway point, like you realize that the guy was like, oh shit, I got a game to finish. But he the story just starts rushing. And it's quite obvious that he like planned for like far bigger world that he actually like then didn't do. But one thing he does really well is that he introduces these characters, and without explaining anything about their backstory, you like them. Like, like the bare necessities. Like, yeah, this guy, he is very shy. But he's very good at flying like sky armor, which is like basically mecha. And this guy is his like older brother friend kind of character who takes care of him, and they're both like doing cool shit together. And oh yeah, this lady steals a lot, and she has a katana for some reason. Like, that's it. But then throughout the story, more and more backstory gets revealed at like very cool places, and that is a skill I hadn't mastered yet, and I'm hopefully will master at some point because I really want to master it.
I think something like that probably comes almost more through experience, just the act of doing it over and over again until you see like what works, like how much you need to show and how much you can leave to imagination, that sort of stuff.
So what I'm hearing, dear listeners, this is Eric's fault. Rewrite the story again. I'm doing it. Thanks. Yeah, I'm doing it. I will do it. Yeah, I will do it.
Write a new story.
No, I'm doing it again.
Nope. Finish this draft. Write something new.
Yeah. I mean, like the first
Fort of Suns.
Fort of Suns.
Reverse harem.
Yeah. Reverse harem. Reverse harem isekai RPG progression fantasy. Come on, let's do it.
Done.
With an urban fantasy twist.
And pirates.
Reverse isekai, reverse harem.
Right. Someone gets sent to a world and then back.
No. Someone gets sent from the world into our world, so I can put urban fantasy in, so the book doesn't sell at all.
Got it.
Right. That's the plan. Yeah.
Right.
No, I got my next project. I will be continuing with The Band, which is it's a dungeon management story about a bunch of college monsters who want to bring metal back to hell because metal has been banned in hell ever since like 2006. So it is. I dream of this book. I dream of Torchbearer too, but about that book too. Like it's way easier to write too because I have the characters stuck in my head.
Yeah, I always love that idea that every time you mention the devil's name, he hears you. And then
That's
ever
so
since
annoying.
the invention of metal, he's just like going crazy.
No, actually, have you watched The Pick of Destiny?
No, I haven't. I know of it, but I just never watched it.
It's with Jack Black and Tenacious D, and at the end they defeat Dave Grohl, who is like Satan in this thing, in a rock off, and ever since then, like they make a bong out of his horn and stuff. Ever since then, Satan doesn't like metal anymore, and now metal is like not necessarily banned in hell, but like heavily frowned upon.
Right. You wind up in one of the lakes of fire.
Yeah. No. They don't do fire anymore. That's like so 15th century. What they're doing now is they're outsourcing all of their people to be NPCs in MMORPGs.
Love it.
Yeah. And so they also, like, when they want to torture people with music these days, it's no longer like satanic metal, it is mumble rap.
Ooh, or crabcore. Do you remember crabcore?
No, dubstep.
Dubstep is also up there. Crabcore, I think it was only one band that was doing it, but it was hilarious. Just
I need to
look for
check that.
crabcore.
Crabcore.
Yeah, a very bizarre pseudo.
I am a great fan of all things crab. I am a vast believer in carcinization.
Right. Very true.
Very true.
Soon we will all become crabs.
Everything will be crab.
That's right.
Tell me, do some shout outs.
Oh, shout out. I mean, obviously we just got to shout out Haylock after crab time, right?
Crab time.
Shout outs are tough. I mean, I have so many friends who
I have so
are
many friends
books but I've already talked about a lot of them. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Hey, go look at Seth Ring's books. I love his books.
Yeah.
Brian Norton's Quest Academy is phenomenal. You should check it out.
Yeah.
Haylock and his Heretical Fishing, phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, put on the spot
Kaiju
here.
Surgeon.
Battlefield Kaiju Surgeon. If you really want to punish yourself,
Surgeon? I could look it up. If you want to torture yourself, yeah.
Oh god, it's such an amazing book that is so painful, and James Hunter. I love Discount Dan. I adore the premise, and again, like, so irritated at myself for not thinking of it before he thought of it and wrote a better book than I could about it. The back rooms are so good and just like so perfect for digging into.
Have you read The Daily Grind?
Mm-mm.
It's a bit like that. It's like after midnight, corporate offices turn into like that, like portals start appearing, and like you fight monsters that are like based on like corporate office stuff. It's by Silver Linings.
Yeah. Also a Wayspring Wanderer, it's a desert druid lit RPG on Royal Road by my friend Joe. Really enjoy it. Joe Worley. What else? Who else can I call out? I mean, Jez, go read Jez's stuff.
Yeah. Age of Expansion was released. Or just released like a while ago.
My friend Robert Keane has some fun books. I really like their Primeval Apocalypse. Is a fun lit RPG with dinosaurs. What else? Who else?
I mean, we're going to be fine, because otherwise Jamie is going to have to like write on all these names. Oh,
that's true. Jamie, apologizing again.
Yeah, it's like this is not a Jamie apologizing podcast.
Oops. It's fine. Oh, Norit Flood and his phenomenally titled Ghost of Randidly.
Randidly Ghosthound. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. When I
enjoyed the series immensely, but I was listening to his episode recently, and I was like, I get where he's coming from when they regret at naming.
Yeah,
sometimes I definitely have those where I'm like, oh man, I should have done a better job naming somebody.
I was talking to a friend. Actually, it was like another author. And I mentioned that, like, it's Randidly. And he's like, no, fuck you, it's not.
Yeah.
It's Randidly. No. Like, Norit says it's Randidly. He's like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. You've broken my concept of this world.
But yeah, it was mad fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the greats, and also finished. Are you gonna finish your story, your series?
Yeah,
at some point?
yeah. There is a plot line a greater plot line that goes along with the good guys, the bad guys, and the theoretical ugly guys, which will someday be written. That all ties together, and there's an end to that. And then whether or not I continue exploring those characters, I don't know. But the story that I have started has an end.
And it's going to have a good end, a bad end, an ugly end.
I mean, who knows, man? You gotta wait and see.
You do.
I think it all depends, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to believe that some people will find it good, some people will find it bad, and probably a lot of people will find it ugly.
You should totally drop like a Kaiiu Battlefield Surgeon ending on it. You should totally do it.
Right. That's what's going to happen. We find out. Oh wait, I don't want to spoil anything.
Then don't.
You have to go read Battlefield Surgeon. Yeah. Oh my God! Don't just go unprepared. It is. I don't want Matt to think that I'm dunking on his book, because it's a great book. It's just such a. If you can read The Road by Cormac McCarthy and be smiling and giggling throughout, you are ready to go hit up Kaiiu Battlefield Surgeon and be okay with no sort of preparation.
Yeah. It is definitely one of the books of all time.
It is a legitimately good story that is very difficult to read.
And we talked about it earlier. Like like balancing it with humor is probably one of the best things that Matt's ever done, because that's why Dungeon Crawler Carl is so good. Matt's like genius needed a platform to shine on, and that's like a perfect circle, because that brings us back down to writing for an audience.
Right. Which is something that's important.
But we should talk about this more in the after show, which is going to be about like 15 minutes, because we did like 50 minutes already. And so far, so good. Any last words from our dear YouTube listeners?
Go read some books instead of watching YouTube.
They're listening to it mostly.
Oh, go read some books instead of listening to YouTube.
See, now I'm getting really conflicted, because on one hand, you helped me with my Patreon a lot, but on the other, you told people to not listen to my podcast.
Finish this podcast, then go read some books.
Thank you. I like it. There's 80 episodes, and there's another bonus hour, at least another hour for each episode that I have on the Patreon. So thank you for that so much, and I'll see you next time. And if you're on Patreon, the show goes on.